This thing is a tank. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave from Chase the Summit, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the Casio G-Shock GBD-H1000-1. That is a mouthful. This watch is not brand new to the market by any means. I think it's been around for about a year now, but in a lot of the comments in my videos, a lot of people have asked about my opinion on this watch, so I thought it would be worth putting on this channel. The GBD-H1000 is a lot different than what I typically talk about on this channel, but it also has a lot in common with those other GPS watches. The Casio G-Shock GBD-H1000, I gotta keep saying that throughout this video, is Casio's first attempt at like a real fitness enthusiast watch. It's designed to track your runs, it's got optical heart rate on the back, it's got some training tools built in, and it's meant to fit that sort of demographic. And in short, it sort of does, but it also doesn't meet those needs at the same time. Before we dive into this video though, if you find it helpful, entertaining, funny, anything, I don't care, consider hitting that thumbs up button down below and subscribing to my channel so you don't miss more videos from me in the future. And as always, if you're interested in the Casio G-Shock GBD-H1000, I'll have links in the description that do help support my channel, but they cost nothing extra to you. And finally, in full disclosure, Casio did send me this product for the purpose of this video to test out and share my opinion about it, but this is not a sponsored video. I'm allowed to tell you my honest and unbiased thoughts about the Casio G-Shock GBD-H1000. I can't believe I said that right so far. Now that I've blabbered enough, let's get into the meat and potatoes, the hardware. Right off the bat, you're gonna notice this is a beastly tank of a watch. This is a very, very large watch. The G-Shock GBD-H1000 is 63 millimeters in diameter and about 20 millimeters thick, and it comes in at over 100 grams in weight. You definitely notice this thing on your wrist. And here's just a quick comparison of some of the other larger watches I have. I've got the Garmin Enduro here, which is a 51 millimeter watch. I've got the Suunto 9 Barrow, which is another pretty big watch. And just for a baseline that kind of everyone knows the size of, is the Apple Watch Series 6 here. And you can see that the GBD-H1000 just trumps all of these watches in terms of size. It's a very large watch. And here's what the GBD-H1000 looks like on my men's 163 millimeter circumference wrist. You can see that it really stands out compared to the Garmin Forerunner 945 LTE that I'm also wearing here. Okay, that's enough raving about the size. This is really a matter of personal preference. If you're a larger person, this might be a good size for you. Personally, for me, I'm like 5'6", I'm 150 pounds. This is a pretty chunky watch for me to wear on a daily basis. In terms of the design of the Casio GBD-H1000, again, it's a pretty powerful, bold statement this thing is putting out. It's got some really aggressive lines to it and some angular design going on the side here. It's interesting. Honestly though, I'm not gonna hate on this thing. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I could see where someone might be attracted to this watch if you're someone who has been into G-Shock watches in the past and this thing just kind of speaks to you. That makes sense. I'm on the fence. I respect what they did here in terms of the bold, powerful statement, but I'm also like, okay, that's a little bit much. Now, apparently this bold design actually has a function to it. These plastic pads around the perimeter here are actually designed to take up some shock if you are to hit it against something. So the GBD-H1000 actually has a pretty high shock resistance. Not only does it have a high shock resistance, but it's also water resistant to 200 meters, which is a lot higher than a lot of the competition. The materials used on the build of this watch is a combination of plastic, like you see here, but underneath the plastic, there's actually a metal bezel, and there's metal throughout the design, like the screws and stuff, and the back plate is actually entirely metal. And overall, the robustness and build of this watch is top notch. I feel like I'd be able to, hit this thing or whack it, and it's definitely not gonna break. It feels well built. It's very chunky. It's got a nice heft to it. It feels like a premium device. As you can see, the Casio G-Shock GBD-H1000 is a 5-button layout. So you've got 2 buttons on the right, top and bottom, and then you've got 3 on the left here. And the left middle button is your dedicated activity start button. Flipping the watch over, you can see there is an optical heart rate sensor housed in the middle of the back of the watch there. And next to the optical heart rate sensor is the USB charger, which you can see here. And if I pop the charger on, that's what it looks like when you've got the watch charging. The lens material used on the glass of the GBD-H1000 is mineral glass, so it's probably similar to something like a Gorilla Glass, and it's got a really nice anti-reflective coating on it that I've noticed in direct sunlight does a great job at getting rid of reflections, so you can actually see the information on the watch very easily at a glance. Now, despite this having a really large 63mm diameter face, The screen on the watch is only about 26 millimeters in diameter. So the display on the watch is actually pretty small in comparison to the overall size of the device itself. The purpose of that smaller display is that this is also a solar enabled watch. So you can actually charge this thing when you're out in the sunlight. And it's a little different than what you see from Garmin in their solar watches in that this has a really high efficiency. So the perimeter of the watch, which is actually a copper color, if you can see that there, is a 100% photovoltaic cell. And what's interesting is if you've got this watch in standby mode and you're not recording a GPS activity, the watch will actually charge up instead of degrading the battery. So if you're out in direct sunlight and you're, just sitting there on a park bench or something with your wrist out in the sun, the watch will be actively charging while you're just hanging out, which is pretty cool. And how that works with battery life, we'll talk about in a little bit. Like I said, this watch does have a 26 millimeter diameter display, and this is an always on display. It is monochrome, so it's only black and white. There's no colors here, but it does give you all the information you need at a glance. If you're in the dark, you can enable the backlight by pressing the top right button here, and you can see the watch lights up. Unfortunately, the backlight timeout settings only allow for up to 3 seconds of backlight at a time, which is kind of a short duration for the backlight. And I've also noticed a weird thing with the backlight where if you click the backlight and then click another button, it actually turns off the backlight. I would prefer that the other buttons actually enable the backlight so I can see what I'm doing in the dark, but for whatever reason, it's kind of the opposite. In terms of the user interface on the GBD-H1000, it's pretty interesting. Basically, there's various modes that you can access by pressing this lower button on the left here, and then there's various different displays of each of those modes by pressing the top left button here. For instance, right now we're in the time mode, so if I click the display here, I can see some other information like my steps for the past 7 days. I can see my estimated VO2 max here, along with my time. I can click over again and see my achievements for the past 6 months. And then I can click over and see my heart rate with the time and date. Another mode we have is the heart rate graph. And again, by clicking the display button, I can cycle through the different displays of this mode. So we've got heart rate. Again, we've got a heart rate with like kind of a larger font along with the time up top. There's also an ABC mode that you can access with the altimeter, barometer, and compass. And again, in this mode up front, you see the altimeter, but if I click the display, I can go to the barometer. Clicking again brings me to the compass. So as you can see, these widgets kind of cycle. I like to think of the mode button as kind of a vertical scrolling, and then the display button as kind of a horizontal scrolling within that mode, if that makes any sense. Another view available on the watch is actually your training status, which will display your status, which I don't have any right now because apparently I've been running with this watch enough. And this will display whether or not you're productive or detraining or recovery. And this is actually licensed by First Beat, who also does this service for Garmin. So you'll get similar stats out of the GBD-H1000 that you'll get on a Garmin device in terms of training status and VO2 max estimation. If I click the display button, you can see that I've got a VO2 max of 53, which it calls very good. By comparison, my Garmin devices and COROS devices both report about a 55 or 56 when it comes to VO2 max. So it seems like the GBD-H1000 is in the right ballpark. Again, I'm not a scientist here and I haven't been lab tested, so I don't know which one's more accurate. Scrolling down to the next mode here, you can see that I can access some of the smartwatch features on the GBD-H1000. You can see that I've got a new email that came in, a new text message, a phone call, a calendar event, and if I click the button on the left here, I can dive into each of these individual notifications and read them one by one. To access the settings on the GBD-H1000, you simply hold down the top left button for a couple of seconds, and that'll drop into the settings. You can see I've got home time, time adjust, world time, alarm clock, profile, and that's going to be just my personal stats like height, weight, sex, all that stuff. Then you've got your auto run detection. So this will actually pick up a run automatically if you forget to start the activity, which is kind of cool. You've got beep volume, backlight settings, vibration settings, pairing, airplane mode, phone finder, which means it'll actually trigger your phone to vibrate and ring so you can find it if you dropped it into your couch or something. That's all I'm going to cover in terms of the overall interface when it comes to the GBD-H1000. If I dive too deep, I know this video will get really long and boring, so that's what we'll do in this one, just kind of a skim over the top. Like I said before, the Casio G-Shock GBD-H1000 does perform some smartwatch functions like calendar events, phone calls, incoming text messages, notifications, all that stuff. And this is all connected to your phone via Bluetooth connectivity. One thing to note though, in terms of connectivity with the GBD-H1000, is it does not support any external sensors. So you can't pair a power sensor to this. You can't even pair an external heart rate sensor like a chest band or anything like that to this watch. Simply doesn't accept those things. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the GBD-H1000. All right, let's talk about battery life with the GBD-H1000. It's both very impressive, but also pretty lackluster at the same time. What I mean by that in standby mode is you can get actually up to 12 months of use out of this watch. So if you just put it on and wear it day by day and, see your text messages and your step count and all that stuff on this watch, you don't have to charge it for an entire year, which is totally bananas. And if you drop into the extended life battery mode, you'll get up to 34 months of smartwatch or standby mode, which is crazy. Of course, these are just claimed battery specs. I haven't tested them, obviously. I haven't sat around for a year and doing nothing. So just take that for what it's worth. When you enable or disable stuff, that'll change how long the battery will last. For instance, when you take the watch out of the box, all day heart rate data is actually turned off. So once you turn that on, you'll actually take a pretty big hit in terms of battery life, even in standby or smartwatch mode. That said, I've still found the battery life on the GBD-H1000 to be really impressive in smartwatch mode. You basically just don't have to worry about charging it. So that's where it's really impressive, but let's talk about GPS battery life now. So if you're recording a GPS activity, you can expect up to 14 hours of continuous tracking out of the GBD-H1000 in its normal accuracy mode. That means it's taking a satellite ping about every 1 second, so it gives you the most accuracy out of this watch. Now, if you want to extend the battery life, say you're doing something like an ultra marathon or something, you can actually go into extended battery mode in GPS mode and get up to 18 hours of activity. Unfortunately, that only samples a satellite ping every 1 minute, so you do sacrifice accuracy for that extended battery life. These numbers may not sound all that bad if you're like an Apple Watch user, but when you look at the competition of what this thing's up against, they're doing like 30, 40 hours of GPS activity, where this is only doing 14 or 18 in extended battery mode. When it comes to general wellness tracking on the GBD-H1000, it will track your steps. It'll give you that information by day, by month. You can view it in the app and kind of see how many steps you've gotten over time. But that's really kind of it in terms of wellness tracking. It doesn't really do anything else other than steps and calories burned during your active time. There's no sleep tracking or anything like that on the GBD-H1000. When it comes to actually recording an activity, like a GPS activity on the GBD-H1000, it's pretty interesting. Basically, there's only one activity profile on the GBD-H1000, and that is run. You can even see the button labeled run right there, meaning if you click this button, it's going to immediately go into that run activity mode. Right off the bat, you'll see that it says now receiving GPS connectivity, so it's looking for satellites. It's not going to find it in the building here, but when you're outside, it will pick up a GPS signal. However, even outside, I've noticed that this can actually take a while compared to my other devices. By clicking the run button again, I've just bypassed the GPS fix situation, and now we're recording our running activity. So you can see now that we're recording our running activity, I've got a bunch of data fields I can view at a glance. I've got my distance, my split time, my pace, and again, if I click the mode button, I can go through the various widgets and see other information that's available. For instance, here I've got my pace, a heart rate, and a heart rate graph around the perimeter. I've got a heart rate graph here. I've got my heart rate with the time of day. And of course, we can dive into our ABC view again. We can see a compass, altimeter, barometer. So you can see all this stuff while you're mid-activity, which is pretty handy. All the data fields available here are actually pretty customizable in the app, which I'll show you in a little bit. Within the app, you can change these data fields around, but there isn't a ton of data fields to choose from. All right, now let's take a look at the companion app that goes along with the GBD-H1000. And that's gonna be the Casio Move app. So you can see here, the Casio Move app just gives you all your information at a glance. And you can see below all the stats from that run, we've also got my recovery time. So it's saying 27 hours to be fully recovered, which might be true because I had a pretty rough week last week. Below that summary widget on the home screen of the Casio Move app, we've also got the set a training plan widget here. So if I click on set a plan, it'll ask me if I want to improve my cardio or train for a race or an event or something like that. Within here, you can actually put in your information like how old you are, how much you weigh, what your target time is, how long your event is, and this will actually come up with a training plan that you can sync with your watch and execute as you go through your training plan. Below that training plan widget, we've got my estimated VO2 max, which is again 53. At the bottom here, we've got our monthly distance gained, and then below that, we've got the steps for the day, active calories for the day, and total distance for the day. And again, you can fully customize all of these widgets on the home screen of the Casio Move app. You can see here, I can reorder them in any way I want, and I can also add more widgets that are at the bottom here that are in the hidden menu. Clicking on the history tab will show you all of your recent activities, so I'll dive into one that I did the other day here. So up top, you've got a map, and then below that, you've got all of your stats for that activity. So you can see 6 miles, took 1 hour to achieve that, It tells me my pace, my cadence, the amount of calories consumed during that activity, and the elevation stats are at the bottom there. Below that, we've got our heart rate zones for that given activity. We've got our training effects. And we've also got our pace chart at the bottom there, along with a heart rate that's overlaid on the pace chart. The app is actually well laid out, easy to use, easy to read. It seems well polished. I haven't had any crashes or bugs or anything like that. And syncing from the watch to the app is actually pretty quick when you complete a run. However, I do have one major gripe with the Casio Move ecosystem as a whole, and it's that you can't actually export a FIP file or GPX file directly from the watch over USB or even from the app after you've completed your activity. So your information is kind of trapped in the Casio ecosystem, which is a pretty big bummer. The only way that I've found to get my information out of the Casio ecosystem is to sync the app with Strava, which it can do, and then download my information from Strava. So it's kind of the middleman to get your information from the Casio Move ecosystem. All right, let's talk about GPS accuracy on the GBD-H1000. And so far it's been pretty good. I've taken the GBD-H1000 out on a series of runs while also wearing my Garmin Forerunner 945 LTE, which in my testing so far has been one of the most accurate GPS watches that I've tested on this channel. During these runs, I was also recording a track with my iPhone just as a baseline for comparison. And all in all, the GBD-H1000 definitely held its own. And most importantly, by the end of the activity, the distances between the various devices were all pretty similar. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with the GPS accuracy coming out of the GBD-H1000. Now let's talk about heart rate accuracy coming from the optical heart rate sensor on the back of the device. To test the accuracy of the optical heart rate sensor on the back of the GBD-H1000, I went out on a series of runs while also wearing the Garmin 945 LTE using that optical heart rate sensor and the Polar H9 chest strap, which is an electrode-based sensor, which is just a little bit more accurate than optical sensors. And again, I was pretty impressed with the heart rate data coming out of the GBD-H1000. It lined up with the Polar H9 chest strap and the Garmin Forerunner 945 LTE pretty similarly. There were a couple of drops and a couple of spikes, but they were very short, and overall I would say that the heart rate data from this watch is acceptable. That is, if you can wear it tight enough to get a good reading. Finally, let's talk about the price of the Casio G-Shock GBD-H1000, and that's going to be $399 here in the US. That might vary where you live. Okay, final thoughts on the Casio G-Shock GBD-H1000. It's a pretty interesting device, but at $399, it's got some fierce competition. There's some weird quirks about this watch in that it only has one activity profile, being that run mode, and for a watch designed for like rugged outdoor use, it's got the altimeter and barometer on board, but it doesn't have like a hiking mode or a mountaineering mode. It's kind of weird. It's designed for runners, but it's really designed for an outdoor enthusiast and not just a runner. And when you've got competition like the Garmin Instinct Solar, which bears a striking resemblance in terms of design to the GBD-H1000 and features all of those other activity modes and the ability to connect to an external heart rate sensor, I think there's a lot going on there that makes a hard sell for the Casio GBD-H1000. And even watches like the COROS Pace 2, which is just $200, offers the ability to connect to a power sensor, an external heart rate sensor, and has a host of other activity profiles to choose from. However, that's not to say this is a bad watch by any capacity, and I do think there's a market for it because of that G-Shock logo that's on the front there. I've noticed that Casio G-Shock users really love their devices and they treat them like collectibles more than they are smartwatches or sports watches. And I think that's where this GBD-H1000 really comes into play. This is for somebody who's been using a G-Shock forever and they want to upgrade to something that can actually record a run, sync with the smartphone, show the notifications on the phone, all that stuff, while also being a G-Shock watch. And I think there's a whole other crowd that might be interested in this watch, and that's going to be the person that doesn't ever want to charge a watch. Being that this can have up to 34 months of battery life if you're not doing GPS activities, that's a pretty interesting selling point for a smartwatch. For me though, that $399 price tag is a little hard to swallow when there's competition out there with so many more features and way longer GPS on battery life. But that's just my opinion and my take on the GBD-H1000 and where it stands in today's marketplace. If you have a different opinion about this watch and you want to share it, make sure to drop down in the comments below and let me know what you think about it. Do you own one? Do you want one? What features interest you? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. That's all I've got for today. Thanks for joining me for this long-winded video about the Casio G-Shock GBD-H1000. I can't believe I haven't messed that up once in this video. If you found this video useful, helpful, you think I'm funny looking, any of the above, please hit that thumbs up button down below and consider subscribing so you don't miss more videos from me in the future. And again, if you're interested in a GBD-H1000, I will have links in the description that do help support my channel, but they don't cost anything extra to you. Okay, I think I'm done now. I'll see you next time. Bye.